Hey guys, I'm Victoria and I chose to do my oral presentation on the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was a system of people, African Americans as well as whites, which offered aid to escaped slaves through routes taken to get across borders such as Canada, where they could be free. NC Quakers established groups of abolitionists that laid the groundwork for the trails and shelters for the escapees. The first step to escape the slaveholder, in which sometimes conductors would pose as a slave, enter the plantation, and send the fugitives northward. At this time, northern states did not have any laws against slavery, and you could be free there. So the fugitives wanted to go there. The fugitives would only move at night, walking about 10 to 20 miles to the next stations. And here they would rest and eat. And while they were doing this, a letter was being sent to the next hidden place. So that station master would be getting ready for their arrival soon. Money was raised by groups for the slaves in order for them to have clothes that looked better, just because they didn't want to get caught. So if they had nicer clothes, they wouldn't be so recognizable. The offense for helping a slave escape was up to 6 months in prison and a $1,000 fine, and that's a big fine for the 1800s. The reason that many escapees decided to go to Canada later on was because they passed a law in 1793 called the Fugitive Slave Acts, and this law actually made it to where even if they were in the northern states, they could be captured and taken back to their original slaveholder. And so it was better off for them to go to Canada, where they didn't have this law at all. The only thing about it was in 1793, they really weren't that strict on this law. They didn't put a lot of enforcement on it. So in 1850, they actually made the law stricter, and it showed favoritism towards the slave owner. And this helped by some of the slaves being recaptured. In Canada, blacks were offered freedom to live where they pleased, sit on juries, run for public office, and more. So you could see why people wanted to be in Canada rather than the United States at this time. Some of the underground operators even based themselves in Canada in order to help the slaves that were arriving settle into their new home. Most of the Underground Railroad operators were your average people, from farmers to business owners. Some of the hiding places were schools, businesses, homes, churches. These were called stations or safe houses, and the people operating the hideouts were called station masters. The people that guided the fugitive slaves were called conductors. Many of us have heard of Harriet Tubman, the famous slave who escaped and helped many others escape as well. After 1863, when the Underground Railroad came above ground, meaning they didn't have to be so secretive about it, Harriet Tubman played a major role again, where she led an intelligence operation and fulfilled a command role in the Union Army to rescue emancipated slaves. She had the courage to risk her life many times in order to save others. And that's one of the things that has made her so popular and so famous. The Underground Railroad plays a huge part in history and led to many books on people who played a role in shaping our history. This is why it's so important to learn about this in our class. It helps us to understand the current world we live in today and to understand different cultures.